Welcome to part 4 of our exploration of the Vue JavaScript framework and how we can use it to build web forms. As you can see, we've already explored a number of web form fields. We're going to continuing exploring a few more here, and this is going to be some of the more rare ones. The first one we're going to look at is the meter field. So, what is a meter field? You may be wondering. Well, it is a gray bar. Not very interesting to look at by default, but we can make it do more than that. It has a minimum value number of 0 by default. We can keep it at that. The maximum value, by default it's 1, but we'll make it 100. And we're going to give it a value, and it's a colon value, which means we're going to be using a Vue variable. And that variable we're using will be simple range. And the range, which we defined earlier, is controlled by this range bar over here. So, what happens to the meter bar now? It fills up with green halfway. 0 to 100. Our range is 0 to 100. And let's change our... let's do a refresh to be sure everything works properly. Okay, as we change our bar around, our meter field moves. Well, great. Is there more going on here? Yes, there is. I'm going to put in a low value of 25. I'm going to put in a optimum value of 50. And I'm going to put in a high value of 75. Alright, so what happens now? I'm going to move up to the high value of 75. And we'll go above the high value, and the meter suddenly turned orange. So let's test the low value now. And we go low, and it's orange. So anytime you're outside the high or low, the bar is orange. If you're within the high or low, it's green. And optimum doesn't seem to change anything. So this could be used, say you've got a kettle of water. You don't want the kettle to be too hot or too full because it might boil over. Or you've got a kettle that might have not enough in it and might boil dry. So it could be used for fridge temperatures, freezer temperatures. Negative numbers will work just fine here. So there's a number of things that you can meter there, and technically it is a read-only field, so let's put it in with the rest of the read-only stuff. There we go. Okay, so let's progress on to our next field set here, to our next form field, and there we go. And that form field is called progress. Alright, so what does progress look like? Progress looks like a bouncing blue bar. Alright, so it kind of looks like something's happening, right? We could use this to indicate to the user, don't worry, something's happening, we'll be done soon. Of course, nothing's happening, it's just a simple tag right now. Let's take a look at some of the values it's got. Progress has a minimum value of 0 because you always start out at 0 and you can't change that. The maximum value, though, by default it's 1, but we'll make it 100. And we'll give it a value, a colon value, because we're going to be using another Vue variable that we've already defined, and that's going to be simple number. And simple number is controlled by this field here. And at 0, it is 0. So let's start moving up. And as we see, as we move up our number up closer to 100, which is the max, our progress bar moves up. If you can quantify how close you are to completing some job or some task, this is a good way of doing it. And as we reach 100 here and go above 100, it's ignored. Values above the maximum are ignored. What about values below the minimum 0? Ignored. And what about numbers that aren't actually numbers? We go back to our bouncing blue bar. All right, so that is what progress is. And again, a progress is technically a read-only field. So let's put it in with the other read-only fields. All right. And move on to something more commonly used and seen. And what we're going to be working with now are, there we go, buttons. All right. I think everyone likes to know what buttons are about. You like to push them and see what happens. Yeah, buttons are just fun to work with, right? Especially from the end user perspective, when all you have to do is push them. But from our perspective, we got to do a little bit of setup to make this button do something. First of all, we'll give it a value, input tag. So that's the name of our button. It's just input tag. We can push it all we want. It doesn't do anything. Say we want it to do something. How about we make a progress field show up? Okay. So we push that button, this progress bar starts showing up and bouncing back and forth. Well, first of all, we want to have that progress bar hidden. So we only want it to show up when we're working on something. All right, that's good. It's now hidden the way we want it to. Now let's define hidden. Define working, I mean. And it's going to be a reference. And we'll make it false by default. Okay, so our progress bar still doesn't show up. And we wanted something to happen when we clicked. So we say @click event. There we go. We want to do work. Okay, so let's define what doing work is. We got our function up here called do work. And what we wanted was to set working, and we got to say value because it's a reference variable. We want to set it equal to true. A reference turns this variable here into a object, and to access that object value we have to say .value. All right, so let's just see if it works. Hey, our bouncing blue bar showed up. Good, and there it is bouncing away, letting us know that something's gonna happen. We'll finish doing what we're doing at some point, right? Maybe not, because we haven't told it to stop doing anything yet. So I've set a timeout here where we're going to set our working value equal to false, and we'll do that after 4 seconds has gone by. All right, so input tag bouncing around, and 4 seconds later it's gone. There we go. We've got an event button that actually does something. Yay! All right. There's more than one way to define buttons. The input tag has been around for pretty much as long as web pages have been around. At some point, somebody came along and said, let's make a button tag. And the main difference is this value here. Remember, we needed value to give some words on our button, but we don't need that here. We just put what we want our button to look like in the body of the tag. All right. And this doesn't have to be words. When it's a value, it has to be words, but down here, this could be an image. Quite common to say a button image. And there we go, bouncing back and forth. It will disappear, and it works the exact same way. Both buttons do the exact same thing. All right, now technically, these is one type of button. And the button type we're going to call this is custom event. We built our event called do work, and these custom made buttons did the work, or called up the work to be done. There are other buttons that have their own intrinsic, do their own thing. They have their own behavior built right into them. And the first one we're going to look at is reset. Okay. And there we are. So we want to change this from do work to do reset button. This will be a custom function that in plain HTML it's not needed, but we're dealing with Vue here. So I'm going to define that button. Now we're not going to do anything with, we're not going to find do reset yet. I'll describe why we need to first. Let's look at what we get with the reset tag. I put in some values and I hit reset, and all our values went back to the basic data. You notice the progress bar remained up a little bit. And let's hit reset, and our progress bar remained up. What's going on? Why did that not reset back to its basic value? Well, let's bring up our Vue tool here and do a refresh to be sure that everything works. So I'm going to put in some values here. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so we put in some values here. There are all our variables. And look what happens when I hit reset. The form reset, but all our Vue variables remain the same. So that's why I defined a do reset event here. If you really want to do a reset button in your form, then you should be dealing with the Vue variables that you've defined as well already and resetting them somehow too. Otherwise you get weird behavior like values suddenly reappearing. Yeah. Okay. So that is our reset button. There is another button actually here. We're not going to go into that other button. I'll just show you what the options are for here for our button type. Button for our custom events, reset, which we just looked at, and submit. Now submit is actually a bit of a big topic onto its own. I don't plan on covering it here because it is its own big topic. And so we will cover that in the next video along with one other tag that I have deliberately left out until now, and anyone observant will probably have noticed what that tag is. So I'll put this code up on GitHub for anyone that wants to play around with this code and experiment. And thank you for watching our exploration of the Vue JavaScript framework and its use in building web forms. Bye for now.